Welcome to episode 2 of Half Hour Security. This is Jerry Oxley, and tonight we have several articles to go over, many of them from Security Week, some from the Hacker News, others from Krebs on Security, all excellent sources. So we'll start out with Microsoft patches tonight. And again, the concept here is I'm not going to read you the articles. I'm just going to be pointing out what stands out in the articles to me and what they mean and what value I find in them. So Article 1 today is Patch Tuesday, which is the second Tuesday of the month. Every month, as you probably well know, the second week of the month is known as Patch Tuesday, where most companies release patches for their products. Now, often they'll have a release for a significant vulnerability in between Patch Tuesdays, but more often than not, it only happens a few times a year. There was one significant vulnerability in the Microsoft patch this month that allowed privilege execution, which can allow someone to, once they've logged into a computer, escalate their privileges to an administrative account and gain control of the machine. This particular vulnerability requires authentication, so it usually comes in the form of some other compromised credential attack that they've already stolen the user ID's password and were able to get in the system in the first place. But if they are able to compromise a standard user's account in a company and a local administrator has logged into the machine, it's possible that they can get administrative rights to that machine and carry out further damage. Adobe also released patches for Flash, Acrobat, Reader, and Photoshop. The Acrobat Reader is the one that's getting the most attention because it provides information disclosure and an exploit is already publicly available. So what does this mean for both Adobe and Microsoft products? You should be patching your critical and high vulnerabilities within 30 days, at maximum 30 days of patch release, but it's best to do it within 24 to 48 hours if at all possible. Last week we talked about some of the megacart breaches, and further research has been done into these megacart breaches, and they have determined it's not just one threat actor doing this, it's 7 different threat actors. The megacart breach, once again, is an attack where the threat actor is scraping information from a website, stealing credit card information. Some of the biggest companies that have been attacked were Ticketmaster, British Airways, Newegg, I think we talked about British Airways last week, Feedify and Shopper Approved, and others. The first two groups use automated tools and modify JavaScripts on the website to really kind of bulk credit card skimming. Group number 3 focuses on targets that before it executes its code, it looks to see if the information on the page has any credit card payment information in it before it executes. So it's kind of smarter, if you will. Group 4 is even more advanced, and it blends in, their code that they make blends in more with the victim site compared to the first two groups. The next group preys on third-party suppliers and creates what I would assume they're talking about as a watering hole. So a lot of people will go to a third-party supplier and get information and infect them. Group 6 focuses on only big companies. Group 7 focuses on any commerce website it can find. It's anything it can compromise that it'll do. I'm not saying that this article is correct in how it analyzes all of these payment card skimmers, but the concern is this. If you are hosting uh, a application that accepts credit cards, you might want to reach out to your hosting provider to make sure that they are taking actions to protect against these mega card hackers. So last week we talked about my thoughts on there will be some federal legislation sooner than later regarding privacy. And the reason why I said that is because GDPR and the European Union and California were starting to set the stage. Well, this article came out and basically said that there is no standard throughout the United States for data privacy, and especially there's no federal law. And we're going to see on an upcoming slide, which is not this one, that large companies are proposing legislation to require or try to push towards a federal law, and that company is Intel. So Intel published a draft bill that they call the Innovative and Ethical Data Use Act of 2018. So I'm here to say it's pretty likely within the next couple of years there will be a new Data Privacy Act that is a federal act that covers all states and will override individual states. But I'm sure that it will say something like this, that this law overrides individual states unless the individual states are more restrictive than the federal law. So you could see a point to where you have to be in compliance with the federal and the local state that you are in. Last week we talked about Cathay Pacific, which is a Hong Kong-based airline. Again, they still are in the news for having their breach of 9.4 million passenger data records, including passport numbers, phone numbers, dates of birth, definitely PII, personally identifiable information. I imagine we're going to be seeing information about Cathay Pacific for several months to come as they go through lawsuits and any potential fines that are imposed on them by government. The point of this is that once you've had a big breach, and especially if you were negligent and slow at reporting it like Cathay Pacific was, it's going to be more painful for you as a company compared to a company that had a breach. You had good controls in place and you did quick and swift data breach notification. So the point of this slide is if you're going to have, if you have a breach, you need to react quickly. A new cyber attack targeting the Pakistan government and military facilities has started. I don't know when it started, but the news just hit this week. It is utilizing complex espionage campaign. I believe it is transferred via phishing attempt where it sends an email to the user and there's a malicious attachment and it gets installed that way. So on that point, if that is true, it's a little bit difficult to fully pinpoint that, but most of these nation-state backed cyber attacks are carried out through a phishing email. So the best form of protection against those is to provide cybersecurity education to your user. And there's several other things you can do too, which we'll talk about over the upcoming weeks and months. They call this particular campaign Operation, I'm not sure, Shein, I'm not sure. But what makes this very sophisticated is it is able to take the following 8 anti-malware products, Sophos, ESET, I don't know about them, Kaspersky, Bitdefender, Avast, Avast, AVG, and Quick Heal. I'm familiar with half of those. I'm not familiar with like Quick Heal. And it's able to turn those off and basically tell the anti-malware product to say, just ignore the malware that is found. I'm going to close my Outlook here so I don't get any further notifications of email. So this is a pretty sophisticated attack. It could mean that there's some country that has ties to all 8 of these products, so it's able to do that. I don't know. But another thing that jumps out to me, it is using an exploit that was identified in 2015. So the point of this is we need to patch our systems. This is 2018. We should have all of our vulnerabilities from 2015 patched. There's no excuse for that. Another point of interest is Kaspersky. In July or June of 2018 has been put on a list of boycotted products that the federal government will no longer allow U.S. companies to buy. So U.S. companies should not even have this product. And I'm not going to get into other products, but I'm a big believer in if you're going to have anti-malware product, you should have an anti-malware product in a company that you feel that they are out there to provide good service and will act on your best interest. Next topic is last week there was a pawn to own in Tokyo 18, and all of the major phones, which they say 3, but really in my opinion there's only 2 phones, the Samsung and the iPhone, but they were all hacked on the first day. So what this means is you've got to do your patches when they come out. We'll probably show an article at some point in the future where there's a big difference between unpatched Android devices and unpatched Apple devices. There appears to be more Android users that don't patch their devices in comparison to iPhone devices. But regardless, even the latest versions of both products can be hacked. So you will not be considered exercising due diligence if you're not patching not only your servers and your desktops, but your mobile devices. And there are many products out there such as Microsoft Intune that can provide mobile device management and patch management for phones. This week, Google Services was out of commission. I don't remember how long, but it was a result of a border gateway protocol leak that pushed all of the traffic through Russia, China, and Nigeria. They're unsure if it was an attack or if it was a misconfiguration. But what the Border Gateway Protocol does is basically you don't have to have it on, but routers can communicate uh, and send data to each other with something called the Border Gateway Protocol. If you corrupt these routing tables, uh, a threat actor can manipulate how routers send communications over the internet so they can send it to a location that was not intended to be sent to. So, back on the concept of federal government and getting involved in data privacy, there was a recent announcement that 51 nation states and all European Union members have pledged their support for a new international agreement to set standards on the use of cyber weapons and the use of internet. Paris, I believe, is the one that brought this up, and is called the Paris Call for Trust in Cybersecurity in Cyberspace. What I found very interesting in this is China, Russia, and the United States did not sign the pledge. Now, I'm not uh, making assumptions here, but um, I've been doing uh, news research for 10 years. And if we go back and look at the nation states that continually are show up in the list of ones that are doing cyber attacks, the United States is one of them, China is one of them, and Russia is one of them. So this is probably a good indicator that um, well, I'm not sure where this is going to go, but uh, some of the three power players in cyber espionage and warfare don't want to play with this agreement. A researcher has been able to bypass user account control by spoofing the execution path of a file in a trusted directory. Uh, Let me tell you this: there's many ways that you can bypass control. I've proved it recently that if if you give me access to the registry, I can make a registry change and grant myself local administrator rights in no time. Um, if a company thinks that um, user account control is enough to protect them from cyber attacks, that's silly. It comes back to we've got to have defense in depth. It's not just one control that will protect us. It's having user account control and disabling regedit, disabling PowerShell, um, disabling writing to certain directories. It's the whole cumulative effect of many controls that is likely going to save you from a advanced persistent threat than an individual control. So again, this is just another article about Intel asking uh, for a federal law on data privacy, which we already talked about. Here was a survey to many nations, Europe, North America, Asia, etc. They said cyber attacks as a result of the 130 country survey is the fifth biggest concern. So it's up there in government's list of risk, and that's a good thing. So if it's on their list, they should be actively doing something to put mitigating controls to help prevent cyber terrorism, cyber warfare, cyber espionage, etc. Um, WordPress is a web hosting software or content management server that a lot of websites use to make creating websites easy for customers. Uh, it was just announced that there's a new GDPR, which is the European law for data privacy. There basically WordPress has a snap-in to review your website to make sure it's GDPR compliant. Well, that makes that particular website vulnerable. So the point being is, if you've got WordPress or your internet service provider uses it, they need to be patching it within a short period of time. There's a new malicious group known as Inception, and they are using a year-old Office exploit and a new backdoor to take control over a PC. So I think the way I read this, you have to have the year-old exploit, which is CVE 2017.11.882, and if that happens, they can put this backdoor in. So what does this mean to me? Don't go a year without putting your patches on. It doesn't matter if the patches are on your servers, and I know I've said it before and tonight, or your workstations or your smartphones, you have to patch. Failure to do so is negligence. Uh, this particular company, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, Roche, let's just say, has 5 critical vulnerabilities in their medical devices that have pretty high vulnerability scores, 8.3 and 6.5, that can allow an attacker to basically get access to them and do malicious things. Something to keep in mind, vulnerability are not just for operating systems of the big companies. It's anything that runs software code is a potential concern for a security hole. This article talks about there's been so many vulnerabilities in recent years that it is making it very difficult to effectively prioritize. Well, the way I look at it is get caught up. Then you don't have to prioritize. And I tell you what the prioritization is. If it's a high or critical, get them done within 30 days. Done. I don't see the point. But I realize what's happening here is people have not got caught up and they don't know where to start. It also says there's an average of 870 unique vulnerabilities a day. That number seems kind of high, but I won't argue against it. Security Week again. Pretty much all these have been Security Week. New spam bot has infected 400,000 devices by sending spam emails. And this is called the BCM. Well, I'm not going to try to pronounce it. Basically, it's targeting routers that have a universal plug-in play feature enabled. This paragraph here tells about how they carry out the payload and what they do later. The point being is turn off any features you don't need. There is no need to have universal plug and play. If you use, I'm familiar with Nessus. Nessus identifies universal plug and play in devices that it scans, and it says turn them off. So if you turn it off, you would not be vulnerable to this issue. Nginx is a load balancing software. Load balancing simply means, let's just say you have a website, rather than have one server to host your website, you would have 2 or more servers to split the load so you can handle a lot more users. Basically, there's a vulnerability that makes their website subject to denial of service attacks. So that, I'm sure, just needs to be patched. So I don't know how to pronounce this, so forgive me. I'm just going to call them DJI, the world's largest drone manufacturer. If I had one, I would probably know how to pronounce it. Unfortunately, this bulletin says that it's likely passing U.S. critical infrastructure and law enforcement data to the Chinese government without any knowledge to the federal government up until this point. So the point of this is if you're in a company and you're bringing in these unique little devices, you have to. I'm not saying don't bring in products like quadcopters, but you need to realize that when you bring in anything that's got code on it, you have to be on the lookout for vulnerabilities and patch it when it is found. Default account in Cisco small business switches can allow remote attackers to gain complete access to these devices. Now here's the workaround. If you have created a new administrator account with a access privilege set to 15, it won't affect you. So let me put it to you in this way. If you follow best practices, and the best practice is whenever you get a new device, don't use the default administrator name. You change it. Simple as that. So if you would have changed the administrator name, you probably would not be affected by this vulnerability. U.S. Cyber Command has started sharing malware samples with the cybersecurity industry, which is a good step of the federal government giving information to the cybersecurity firms to help protect everyone against them, not just the federal government. So November 8th was the anniversary, the 30th anniversary of one of the first known cyber attacks, and it wasn't really a deliberate one. It was a guy named Robert Morris who wanted to figure out how big the internet was. He was a student at Cornell at the time. He wrote a routine, and it got out of control and brought down the internet. I don't remember much more about it, but it was the first distributed denial of service attack, or maybe it's just a DDoS attack. Regardless, kind of a date in history. Last week we talked about self-encrypting hard drives are now vulnerable. So Microsoft announced provided guidance on how to protect against them by using software encryption, which we did talk about last week, but it was not necessarily a Microsoft announcement at that point in time. Evernote is a software package to take notes on smartphones. I don't know what else it's used for, but it's subject now to a cross-site scripting vulnerability to steal files and run commands. That means upgrade it. China Telecom constantly misdirects internet traffic. I don't know if this is related to the BGP error that we talked about on the Google slide or not, but this company has had a footprint in the United States for 2 decades and 10 point of presence, and they're said that they've been doing traffic hijacking. Maybe, maybe not. Worldwide inventor wants a new contract to make the web safe. So, a British scientist named Tim Berners-Lee, who in 1989 created the World Wide Web as a way to exchange information. What he's saying now is deviated from the goals the founders had created at that one point in time, and we need to bring it back in alignment to its original vision. I don't know where that's going to go. I just found it interesting. So we've got GDPR wanting to control privacy. We've got California wanting to put data controls in that state. We have Intel and other companies wanting federal regulation. We have 51 nation states wanting a ban against cyber attacks. We have the inventor of the internet wanting to put new controls in place. It's this concern about cyber warfare and data privacy is coming from every direction. So this is not the beginning or the end of it. Google removes some vulnerable software from Android. Uh, just note of that. Microsoft, this is kind of an addition to what we've already talked about. Microsoft patched 12 critical vulnerabilities out of 60. Out of 63 vulnerabilities this month, 12 of them was critical, which is a pretty large percentage. Um, so what does that mean? If you accept payment card processing, you have 30 days to deploy at minimum those 12 critical vulnerabilities and how many ever high vulnerabilities that are in there. This dark reading article says 2018 is on track to be one of the worst years ever for data breaches. There's been 3,676 reported breaches and over 3.6 billion records in the first 9 months. So I would say we're on track to bust that record. I don't know much about this because it just has a few paragraphs, but another Facebook bug have exposed your privacy data. Privacy data breaches are just part of our daily lives. More to be learned about that, I'm sure. Hacker News, top 5 uh, ways that can increase your salary. So this isn't about security, but this is for the security professionals. I found it kind of interesting. Choosing the right type of role. So certain roles pay more than others. I love to do penetration testing, but it is the least paying job. But I tell you what, it's the most rewarding to me. Um, but cybersecurity engineers, those that design all the controls that need to be put in place to protect a company from modern day threats. That's what I love too. That is one of the highest paid salaries you can have. They would be the ones that would help you design and pick what to buy, such as a firewall intrusion detection, sandbox filtering, etc., etc. Experience, of course, experience pays, but I found this kind of strange that an entry-level cybersecurity person only earns less than 8,000, only earns 8,000 less than a seasoned one. Location, of course, makes a difference. Florida doesn't pay as well as Illinois. Chicago pays more than Springfield, Illinois. Um, and I'm sure Tennessee doesn't pay as well as California or New York. Certifications do make a difference in this field. Uh, Certified Information System Manager could mean up to $25,000 difference. CISSP, Certified Information Security Professional, $15,000 difference. Certified Information System Auditor, any one of these can make a 5 to 25% difference in your salary and the work that you have done. So I know a lot of people say only give a one-page resume. I'm here to say that if you're in a cybersecurity field, put down everything that you've done to make your resume look good, and I think it does help. Positive news here. Windows 10 is soon going to be including in a future update, I believe, WPA. Um, uh, WPA 3, which is the next evolution uh, of Wi-Fi security, WPA 1, and WPA 2, and the previous predecessor, WEP, which stands for Wireless Encryption Protocol, have all been compromised, so WPA 3 is a welcome improvement. Here's a interesting news article from Krebs on security. Um, a recent concern is companies that have failed to renew their domain are bought by threat actors and they put up fake domains and steal credit card and other personal information, and both the users and the previous company could be somewhat liable for that. And the last thing we'll talk about tonight is SIM swappers. A SIM is the card that you put in your smartphone to give it its phone number and all the other information that your carrier needs. Uh, this is a very complex type of cyber attack and is typically only done targeting high value targets. Um, what they can do is basically uh, do a phone transfer and transfer. They're able. I'm not going to go through the details of how it works tonight, but basically, they are able to use their phone to take to have a person's phone transferred to the threat actor, and then they can do bank transactions or other transactions. And a recent one in, I can't see the name of the state, but one of those resulted in a $100,000 loss of funds. So SIM swap attacks are relatively new. It's starting to get some press. I am by no means an expert on it, but I am going to be keeping my eye on it. So, with that being said, that is the end of episode 2. And please subscribe if you like. And I'll be back next week. Thank you. Have a good night.